tiny little mirror in my hand. What's the most disturbing novel in all of the land?
I don't think this mirror is going to be able to tell you that, but I can. That's the subject of today's video. If you can't tell, we're going to be talking about disturbing, grotesque, absolutely stunningly gross, and maybe a little too transgressive of fiction. Hi, welcome if you're new to the channel. I don't usually dress like this. This is a Halloween special. Halloween's right around the corner, and luckily for you, I am dressed as some vaguely discernible woman from some time period, and I'm going to tell you about the books that made me feel a little queasy, a little bit gross, and absolutely smothered with the X. So, let's start with an author who I told myself I would get into this year, and I did. I successfully got into this author this year, and that is Dennis Cooper. I've briefly talked about him in a couple of other videos, but I wanted to fully dedicate how unhinged his writing really is. For me, Cooper is an interesting character. He's born the same exact day as me, January 10th, so for anybody ever wondering about my star sign, I am a true Capricorn through and through. Born 8:30 on a Monday. Couldn't be more square than that. So it's very interesting to me when I see somebody with the same exact birthday as I be so deranged in their writing. Now, what I've read from Cooper is Frisk and The Sluts. The Sluts probably being one of his most popular novels, one that kind of predicted how wide-ranging that the internet would be. The Sluts follows this online chat room for men who want to express themselves through these channels of interaction. They become fixated on this particular man as he kind of exchanges within groups. He becomes kind of like this online legend, like Reddit before Reddit. That book was a little bit disturbing, definitely. There were things that made me kind of go, oh, ooh, ah, ow. Something that somebody from my time period definitely would never understand. No, but seriously, that book I don't think was actually the most disturbing that I read out of the two. Frisk is the second novel that I read of his this year, and for me, that one took the cake. That one was a little bit more violent in nature. That one, again, is experiencing these men going around and engaging in relationships, and it's kind of blurring the lines between what is reality and what is more of fantasy. I first came across Frisk. I was in a thrift store in Manhattan, and I saw it, and I wanted to buy it. I never purchased it. And then I became deeply obsessed with Cooper, and I became obsessed with researching a lot of his novels. All of his novels that I'm talking about now are part of the George Miles cycle. It's kind of like a dedication. But I would say that Cooper really shocks me in the way that he writes about situations, about characters, and about really, again, blurring that line between what is reality and what is fiction, what is made up in our head, and what is acceptable in this world, and kind of like what is acceptable to even write about. I don't know if I necessarily liked Cooper's writing. I think I just was baffled by the experience. I'm not a prude, okay, by any means, but there was definitely parts of that that made me a little rumble in my tumble. in my tummy. A little rumble in my tummy. A little rumble in my tumble. That's right. That's what we're going with. If you want disturbing, if you want strange, Dennis Cooper is absolutely your guy. Another book, The Story of the Eye. This one is a very famous transgressive piece of fiction. This is a piece of fiction, I hope, that explores two young beings, boy and a girl, really diving into their bodies, into each other, and kind of grasping at, again, what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, exploring a world with no rules, exploring a world where anything is possible if you want to do it. And that's exactly what these two youngins are getting into. Of course, the name, the title, The Story of the Eye, there is a very pivotal scene that involves an eyeball, and you can really only imagine, really. Just extend your mind, extrapolate what you think might happen with that eyeball. It's also interesting to me as I'm sitting here, I feel like there's a lot of these really transgressive books that involve eyeballs. I don't know what that is. I don't know, that symbolism might be a little bit over my head. Maybe it's like a very sensory response. It's kind of, again, channeling what we see and like popping out and saying you can do much more if you extract the binary. I don't know. Is that too deep? I think so. Yeah, that book is a wild one. That one's wild. Really again, I'm not sure if I like that, but definitely disturbing and grounded up a little bit of my sanity for a minute. Just for a minute. Then I do have to, if I'm going to talk about disturbing novels, weird novels, I have to talk about Perfume. I totally forgot about that book when talking about these books of this particular genre. I don't know why, but that book wasn't like a favorite book to me. But every time I think about it, I am immediately transported to the imagery that that book possesses. It is about a perfumer who has a heightened sense of smell, but really no odor. And his mission in life is to create kind of like the perfect scent. His life is marred with tragedy. Lots of people in his life die, these unfortunate deaths, and the crescendo of this entire novel is the ending scene. I think I quite literally wrote, what the f was that last scene? Wild, even by these novels' standards. So I think that was the main takeaway from this novel that I had. Definitely strange, but I feel like this was straddled a little bit more in storytelling as opposed to kind of shock value, which I think was pretty important. And I think that that's the reason that this novel has been able to go on for so long and to become so many people's favorite novel, because it is a great story. It's kind of set in this magical realism as well. And you kind of feel for these characters. You do feel like, oh my God, these crazy things are happening, but you are able to sink into the story, which I think is very important, as opposed to some of the novels on here.
Weird. Startling.
The next book, and this is weirdly the only physical copy that I have, but I'm keeping on to this, Crash by J.G. Ballard. Now, listen to me here. I had wanted to read Ballard's novel, specifically Crash, for a long time. He's a very famous author, known for the likes of last year's Met Gala, which unfortunately they did not ask me to attend. Last year's Met Gala was inspired by a novel, or a short story, I believe, of his, and he also wrote The Empire of the Sun, which is a movie, is based on a very famous movie with a young Christian Bale. This was also the inspiration for a movie, a David Cronenberg movie called Crash, the same exact title. And I first came across the movie, late night IFC, alone watching it. Shouldn't have been, but there I was, absolutely enraptured by James Spader making sweet love in a car, to a car, by a car. So I was so interested to pick this up for a very long time, and I finally picked it up this year. I was on a weird, transgressive, and strange, disturbing novel kick. This one was kind of the catalyst of it all. This book, if you're not familiar, it follows a man who is involved in a car crash, and subsequently he begins having these darkly vivid fantasies of people who are injured in car crashes, and begins engaging on this kind of reckless sexual behavior. There's moments in this book that are just wild, really wild, but I think it's just more of kind of grappling with loss of life and maybe loss of movement, loss of that vitality within one another, and kind of showing the magnetism between man and machine, and kind of using this extended lifeline to satisfy your loneliness. I don't know if that's right, but I'm running with it. Very interested to read more of Ballard's work, especially because he has a whole catalog of books that range from so many different topics. This one seems almost like an outlier, so I'm excited to read more of his work and see what other things his mind comes up with. So definitely a weird one, but one. You know. Okay. So now I want to talk about some books that have disturbing elements to them, but are not all the way disturbing. The first one that I want to talk about is The Informers by Bret Easton Ellis. This is probably his least popular novel. It's all short stories, and they're kind of loosely tied together. It all highlights California in the 80s and these offbeat characters that somehow are showing, again, the underbelly of what you think that this luxury is. I like Bret Easton Ellis a lot. The Shards is now one of my all-time favorite novels. I would put The Shards on here, but I don't really think that it's that disturbing, honestly. I think it's a good kind of like crime-adjacent novel, so I don't really think it puts me in that mood. But The Informers, not all the stories were very, very gross. There was one particular story towards the end that involves a kidnapping that absolutely just put me over the edge. Kidnapping of a child, anything like that. I have a really, 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 really hard time digesting. I've talked about it before, but anything with children really just puts me over the edge. I can't do it. The next book that I want to talk about is, again, a very popular book. A book that I think a lot of people see as overtly disturbing, but I just think that this book is a little bit more unsettling, and that is Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. I looked it up. This book I read a long time ago, and I still have a feeling about this novel. I remember I was reading it on my parents' couch. It was during COVID, actually. Very troubling book to read during COVID. But there's a particular moment, if you've read this book, and you know it's like a very pivotal moment in this book. It involves the main character's daughter. He is basically a disgraced professor. He has a relationship with a younger woman, and so he kind of retreats to lick his wounds and live with his daughter. And there is a moment in the book that involves his daughter that is just so... it sets the tone of the entire book. The book is already very sad. You know, it's just looking at sad lives and sad decisions and how we live with what has happened to us. Looking at these disgraceful acts, right? And how we amend, how we try to reemerge after that. Great writing. All right, you filthy animals. 2 more books, and these ones, again, are more of kind of like tone and pivotal moments. A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. A classic, right? A lot of this book, we think about the movie associated with it. And I do have to say, I've watched the movie, I've read the book, and I think I might prefer the movie to the book. I think the imagery helps you capture the essence of the story a little bit more. Though I will say that this is the first book that I've ever had to teach myself a language to read. Basically, the way that the book is written, they're talking in their own language, which I forget the name of it, but you basically go to the back and you flip through and you see what the translation is. So already you're immersed in this strange world with these strange characters, but what makes this so unsettling is that you're in the mind of somebody who has basically no conscience. You're in the mind of somebody who is only setting out to wreak havoc, the most extreme sorts of havoc, and has no idea what it would be like otherwise. This book, yeah, I mean, would I reread this? Maybe I would. It's definitely a challenging read for sure, but I think it's kind of a trip if you are invested in it, which I was at the time. And then the last book that I want to talk about, that I need to talk about, and this again is looking at a particular scene that just hurts me. And that is The Last Taxi Driver by Lee Durkee. I read this book a long time ago, and it's all about a taxi driver in rural Mississippi. And he's picking up these clients, he's picking up people, he's intervening into their lives, and he's getting to know them. And it's all about this very poverty-ridden area and analyzing the situations of life there. The main character, he kind of keeps to himself, but there's something very unattached about his personality. There's something that's keeping him from fully divulging in who he is. And again, there's a very pivotal scene in this book, and it's just so arresting in its intoxicating rhythm. It's so sad. It's so sad, and you kind of begin to find out a little bit more about the character, and it really was just a moment that I still think about so much. It took me by surprise, and it hurt me, and it disturbed me, and I think that is what puts it on this list. Oh! Did you guys read any of these books? Have you ever read any? Do these feel appropriate? Let me know. I'd love to know. I'd love to know what is another disturbing book. I've made a couple of videos about well, 2. This will be the second. So not a couple. Well, technically a couple. What is a couple? You know, it's 2, right? I always get into a fight with Oleg about that. Very important fight. I've made 2 videos now about disturbing books. What other books would you add to this list? I feel like this is a pretty stacked series. I'll hopefully be doing another one about weird books because I know everybody loves that. Also, let me know what you're going to be dressing up for Halloween. I'd love to hear your costumes. I don't know if I'm going to be getting dressed up. I really don't know if I am comfortable getting dressed up. I've dressed up only a couple times in the past couple of years, and one of them included the guitar player for Metallica. So I am a fully diverse individual. Anyway, you guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one.